Hello, this is Chuck Sachs for Indie Opera Podcast, and I'll be talking with tenor William Burden, who will be performing Oedipus in Igor Stravinsky's Oedipus Rex, presented by Opera Philadelphia on January 21st and 23rd in Verizon Hall at the Kimmel Center. Good morning. How are you today, sir?
Good morning. Doing great.
I hope your holidays were good.
They were. We had to make some adjustments to plans due to COVID, but we had a wonderful time.
That's good to hear. Mine were quiet, but that's how I wanted them.
Good.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk today about what's coming up immediately, and that's Oedipus Rex. But wondering, how has the COVID pandemic affected your career? And were you able to perform it all during the past 21 months? And I mean,
yeah, it's like everyone, like all of my colleagues, it definitely affected my career. I had some cancellations. I had some work that I canceled out of an abundance of caution. But I also was able to do some amazing new projects. I did sort of what we believe was the first Zoom opera with Opera Fort Worth. It was a new commissioned work that it was the story of a small book club that was meeting online on Zoom. So I took part in that, and it was a ton of fun and stretched us all technically, and but it happened right actually in this room. And then I actually spent the summer at Glimmerglass as both an artist and as one of the artists in residence. And we did live performance again, outdoors on a remarkable stage that was built specifically for the summer festival. And I am, knock wood, I have some performances coming up through the rest of the course of this year, The other side of that, too, is that I'm now on the faculty of two of the conservatories in Manhattan, and I was able to teach remotely throughout the whole pandemic. So I was incredibly fortunate.
Well, congratulations on that. It's always good to see new faculty come on to those schools. So now, I know Oedipus Rex was not your first live performance, but how has the pandemic affected how you're able to prepare for a role, though?
Well, other than being able to work with a coach in person, in which I'm now able to do more now that, of course, we have vaccinations and boosters and all of the above. So we are all feeling more comfortable about being in space together and sharing air. It really didn't change my preparation much, because I've always been very much a prepare on my own until I'm able to do that. So I have a handful of wonderful coaches, one in particular that I work with very regularly that I work through things. So I'll see Chris next week in New York. We'll have a couple of coachings before we start rehearsals for the Oedipus.
Yes, and Oedipus Rex libretto is in Latin, which I believe is extremely rare for an opera-oratorio. Did that lengthen the amount of preparation you needed to do? Have you had a good amount of experience singing in Latin before?
I've had some experience. There's so much of the concert repertoire that comes from Catholic liturgy, requiems and masses and all of those sorts of pieces. So I've had some exposure. I had a year of Latin in high school, which was very helpful. But what is unique about this piece is using Latin to actually compel a dramatic storyline rather than a sacred one. And so that is really interesting. And it was, it has its challenges, because again, it's actually very challenging to find very specific translation, but it is, it's an amazing story, and told in this way,
Mhm.
you get the overarching dramatic themes through the language, which
Yeah,
is great.
I know. I mean, the libretto was originally written by Jean Cocteau in French,
Right.
and Stravinsky made the decision. Well, his first thought was to do it in ancient Greek, which
I'm very
got
grateful he jettisoned. Yeah.
yes, I've spoken sung in Old French, and I've had to sing in older Russian, and both experiences were not my friendliest time. You know,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
just uh, and I mean, of course, I'm sure I mean, we know Italian and French and maybe some Spanish, but that's where the fun comes in when you're singing Latin because
Right.
it is and it isn't.
Right.
So
It is, however, a very vocal language.
yes,
So, and through the lengthy tradition of sacred singing in Latin, it is a language that most singers have some uh, kind of a natural affinity for.
yes. So why do you think that Stravinsky really made the choice to put this piece into Latin?
I've been thinking about that a lot, and this is absolutely my
Hmm.
opinion, but I do think when you're talking about these huge human emotions, hubris, greed, the and the incredible emotional outpouring of this story that we know from ancient Greek,
Right. I mean, no spoilers. I mean,
Greek
it's,
mythology, right? That I think it is a perfect example of opera at its very best, allowing music and text to create an emotional experience for an audience, even if they are not native speakers of that. Previous to there being super titles, we all went to the opera and maybe read the libretto ahead of time, but we were moved by the the union of music and text. And, add to that the incredible rhythmic drive that Stravinsky adds to all of his orchestration. And I think we create an incredible piece of drama. And I also think he was then harkening back to ancient Greek tragedy.
hmm and I mean, this is also the beginning of his neoclassical period.
Right.
So I know it's one of the statements it says it's kind of proto-Handelian.
Yeah, in a way, there's a very florid treatment of text at different times, and also, the other thing that he does that is so remarkable is the chorus in this piece, the Greek chorus, which is narrator, commentator, truly the most important character in the piece, it has this huge impact in this. And if you think of a lot of
Hmm.
Stravinsky's other big orchestral works that have vocal aspects, the chorus is always a huge part. The Rake's Progress, for example, the chorus in the Rake's Progress is incredible.
Yes, I mean, or as is the same way Britain uses the chorus.
Correct. Yeah.
In a sense, Britain also uses the chorus in a very Greek way.
Right. Right.
So, is there actual interaction between the soloist, between the characters and the chorus? Is there, I mean, or are they just commentators in a
It's,
respect?
there is some interaction. There is some, because the chorus becomes the people They become the people that Oedipus as king is speaking to. They then, you know, very often characters step out of the chorus to also become other characters within the context of the story. But overarchingly, they are the narrator and the real dramatic rhythmic drive of the piece.
And is it written for a large orchestra or is it a chamber?
It's sort of a balance. It is.
Because I've not seen this piece, so I'm so excited to finally
The
see it,
thing
hear
is,
it.
it is a relatively full orchestra, but with less strings than most would have, but a lot of woodwind and brass, and there's timpani and a lot of the sort of rhythmic section. So
Mhm.
it's a remarkable piece.
I'm very much looking forward to it. So uh, this is a return to you to Opera Philadelphia. When was the last time you were working at Opera Philadelphia, and what do you like so much about working there?
Opera Philadelphia has been a home for me. I actually started. I made my debut a year in advance of my scheduled debut. I'd been hired to sing Belmonte in a production of Mozart's Abduction from the Seraglio, and the season before, I jumped in to actually sing Tom Rakewell and Stravinsky's The Rake's Progress.
Well,
This is a wonderful sort of. It's funny, Chuck. I hadn't actually thought about this until just now, but this is a real full circle for me. Yeah, I made my debut at what was then Opera Theater of no of the Philadelphia. What was it?
Opera
Op,
Philadelphia Opera Company.
yes, the Philadelphia Opera Company, as Tom Rakewell in The Rake's Progress, and so
Wow.
which was in the relatively early '90s. So I have a very long history with this wonderful company, and I, just I know so many people there, and it truly does feel like a coming home anytime I get the opportunity to work
And
here.
but I mean, but the difference this time is it's going to be in Verizon Hall, not in the
Right,
Academy of Music.
right,
And I haven't been in that hall either yet. I've walked around it because I've been in the Kimmel Center, but
sure,
it's going to be a new experience for all of us.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So, in closing, what are your other upcoming engagements? I kind of know what they are. One of them is, and I'm looking forward to that. But
Yeah, well, I have a couple of exciting new pieces that I'm taking part in. One is in the late spring at the Metropolitan Opera, the production of Hamlet, a new Hamlet. Um, Composer Brett Dean, British composer. The production is coming to the Met from Glyndebourne. But this will be its American premiere, and I'll be singing the role of Polonius in that. And then a new piece written by Kevin Putz. It is a wonderful piece.
wait,
It
is
is
that the hours?
Yes, it's an operatic setting of the story The Hours, which will be premiered in concert with the Philadelphia Orchestra.
Right, and that's with Renee Fleming,
Yep.
Joyce DiDonato, and Kelly O'Hara, if I remember.
Yeah, I don't think it's Joyce, although I may be mistaken.
No, you
It's
may be right.
Jennifer Johnson Cano.
Yes, I think
Yeah.
there's kind of switch out. I just actually looked at that, and I'm looking forward to that. I hadn't seen that until I went
Yeah.
and started researching for this interview, and it's like, wait a minute, I
Yeah,
guess I'm
and
going down.
the piece will be then done at the Met. I mean, I may be speaking out of school now since the seasons haven't been announced,
Yes,
but it will have an operatic staged production,
but now that's in March with Philadelphia Orchestra and Yannick.
concert performances. Yes, with Yannick
Yes,
conducting.
and Hamlet is in May.
Right, late May, early June.
Yes, because the Met now goes that far into the
It
sequence.
does.
Yes.
And, again, they've been doing remarkable things throughout this
Oh,
open season. So,
yes, it is. I'm seeing Rigoletto tomorrow night,
oh,
as opposed
fantastic.
to, unfortunately, some other productions that have all been canceled, but not at the Met. But so I've
Yeah.
been looking forward to something this week.
Yeah, well, good. Oh, I hope you'll enjoy the Rigoletto. A friend and colleague actually wound up going on the other night for Quinn, who I guess was indisposed.
Ah,
Michael Chioldi got to sing the title role in
really?
Rigoletto. Yeah. So that's been one of the amazing things that's happened this season is covers have had incredible opportunities. And there is a whole new world opening up for the companies needing to have backups, needing to be prepared to sort of roll with the punches that this time and this pandemic have sort of thrown at all of us.
Well, thank you for talking with me. I'm excited to see you on stage in a bare couple of weeks. And this has been Chuck Sachs with William Burden for Indie Opera Podcast, and see you all soon. Hello, this is Chuck Sachs for Indie Opera Podcast, and I've invited mezzo-soprano Rehanna Thelwell to chat about her Opera Philadelphia debut singing Jocaste in Igor Stravinsky's Oedipus Rex that is being presented on January 21st and 23rd in Verizon Hall at the Kimmel Center. Good afternoon. How are you, Rehanna? So nice to meet you.
I'm good. It's actually pronounced Rihanna.
One of the things I'm supposed to ask before I start this, but
That's okay.
Rihanna, yes, thank you. I apologize.
That's absolutely okay.
So now you're down in Silver Spring, Maryland.
Correct.
And you said we just finally got snow here in New York, in the early morning to now, and it stopped pretty early, and it's getting to clear up and get all, ugly. But you've had a lot more down there.
Ooh, Monday we ended up getting about 10 inches out of nowhere. I actually just came back from the holiday travels and instantly was like, well, it's going to be about 4 to 10 inches tomorrow. And I'm like, and I have to immediately go to the grocery store.
Yes. And you like mentions like snow day, but there aren't really snow days for kids anymore because of Zoom.
That part.
It's like, yes, we got snow days at least growing up.
Yeah. These kids today, they're going through a lot.
Yeah. Although sometimes we had to wait for a snow day to be like a blizzard. It's like, okay, no, you don't have to go to school today because there's 4 feet of snow and we'll keep you out.
Good.
Right. Now it's like, oh well. So you are singing in Oedipus Rex, and is this your first live performance in the 2021-22 season?
Not in the 21-22 season, but this will be my first one for 22. So I'm very excited to get back into the swing of things because with the Omicron variant taking over, I'm just really hoping that everything can move forward swiftly and that we can actually put this piece on.
Oh, yes, I really do hope so. I had a whole slew of things that have been canceled for next week, sadly. But I am going to Rigoletto tonight at the Met.
Oh, congrats!
So, yay. And has the pandemic affected how you are able to prepare for a new role?
Absolutely. I mean, for a good stretch of time, a lot of things were completely virtual. So you had coachings and teachers that could only hear you over Zoom or over Skype. And when you're used to having that ear in the room and that ear is not even in the building anymore, you're hearing different things. During the pandemic, I started singing smaller, if that makes sense. Like as opera singers, you're so used to filling a room, and now all of a sudden the roof came in even more. And a lot of people were performing and singing inside of their apartments, which my neighbors truly enjoyed. But I mean, we have to be resourceful in 2020. We had to be resourceful in 21. So I mean, you had to do it either way. It was a difficult time to get through, but we got through it, and here we are coming out of it, sort of.
Yes, and I mean, it's the Stravinsky piece is not quite conducive to orchestral reduction for, I mean, to give you a real idea of what's happening in, when under piano, it's like, but yay. So, the libretto for this opera oratorio is interesting because it was originally written in French by Jean Cocteau, but then intentionally translated into Latin, which is rare for an opera or an oratorio. You would agree.
Sure.
Have you had a lot of experience singing in Latin before this?
Not a lot. I had the experience of singing the Bach Magnificat actually quite recently, but other than that, outside of church music and some choral pieces, this was kind of outside of my realm of expertise. So it was a fun challenge to kind of learn a language that, even though I knew, I didn't grasp as well as, say, German and French. And so it was getting to know the language a little more intimately. And it was that was the part that I truly enjoyed.
Yeah, I've sung in French and Spanish and Italian, and I mean, they're all close, but not quite. And then you go to Latin, which is the base for most of them. And there's, is this a hard consonant? Is this a soft? It's like,
depending on where you are in the world, whether it's Italian Latin or German Latin. So
right. And then the other point, I was speaking to Bill Burden, and it's the whole other fact is that, however, this is now Latin being used in a dramatic sensibility, because we are used to it in say, church music or something like that. But here it is actually to tell the story, and that is quite different use.
Yes.
So Jocaste is another tragic female role. So what are your thoughts about this long-standing opera trope of women who kill themselves or who are murdered? We've talked a lot about this on the podcast, and Brooke Larimore has very specific feelings about this. And I too, it's like, I'm at the opera now, I'm like going, not this again.
Yeah, well, when it comes to that trope, it does get very, very redundant. With the exception of maybe Pamina, I honestly can't think of a soprano role off the top of my head who doesn't die. So I'm just glad that we're getting into a more modern sensibility of storytelling and operatic singing, because now we're telling stories that are, not nearly rooted in misogyny and other things. So it's nice to finally be able to escape from that trope.
I mean,
not in this opera.
I would say more American operas don't fall into that trope as much. Definitely true. A period. I mean, yes, there are some big dramas and everything like that, but it was a shift, especially, I mean, towards more realistic and more down to earth people. And following on that, there's been a big upsurge, as we all know, in companies producing new or lesser known operas featuring African-American characters and stories by actual writers of color. Have you performed in any of them? And I kind of know this answer, but yeah, yes, go ahead.
I've actually performed in a lot of them currently, and I'm very happy for that, because it truly was until recently that I had the experience to perform music of color. I was able to do Highway 1 with the Opera Theater of St. Louis. I also did their production of Fire Shut Up in My Bones. I'm actually going back to Chicago to do Fire Shut Up in My Bones there. I was able to work on the new piece by Carlos Simon, Night Trip, which also focuses on a Black family. So it's finally time to see people of color tell their stories. I mean, I would love to see a story of color where it's not wrapped in tragedy, but I mean, it's still important to hear these stories, and just to know that there's a lot of musical intricacies that you don't get in traditional music, that you get to enjoy in this new modern music. So it's been an absolute joy to be able to step into a character that I recognize. Before I even get to know them, I recognize them.
And you did where you did Blue down in Washington National Opera?
Yeah, yes and
Sort
no.
of.
Unfortunately, that was right before the pandemic. So we were like 2 rehearsals before we were supposed to go on, and then everything shut down. So
I
I
know.
technically haven't been able to perform Blue yet, but that is in my repertoire.
But did they record it?
They did. There's a recording that I believe is coming out sometime either later this year or sometime in 23. But there has been a recording made that, I mean, that was all that really W&O could do at the time, because they really did try to put it back on its feet, and it wasn't a possibility.
I was going to come down there, and then I said, okay, I don't have to go down there because it's going to be done at mostly Mozart.
Yeah.
And then
I was supposed to do that as well.
And it's like, damn you, COVID.
That part.
I know it's because we had the chance to talk with Janine and Tesori and Tazewell Thompson before it even premiered out in St. Louis, was it?
I don't think Blue did St. Louis, but
No, it was Chicago.
Glimmerglass.
Glimmerglass. Yes, right. Starting to mix through too many things in my mind.
But a lot of things have happened. It's absolutely okay.
Yes. Yes, and it was fascinating to learn how it developed and where the story came from. Yes, you're right. It's like now it's the next level of starting to see time to see stories with African American characters that aren't tragic. But and it's starting. There's like well, it wasn't really African American character, but Snowy Day was just done, and
I loved Snowy Day. That was such a wonderful production.
And so Kiki Slack was in there as the mother, and it's like between you and her, it's like who has done more roles in the new operas at this point?
For sure.
But I mean, it's great to see, and I was just talking with Tiffany Townsend about present representation, and she talked about when she got to do The Love of Three Oranges by Prokofiev at Opera Philadelphia, and she's thumbing through the score and thinking, oh, am I one of the 2 princesses who die? It's like, no, I'm the one who lives. I'm actually a secondary character. Yeah. I get to play the princess, which has been another rarity, as we know. I mean, in the opera world,
that is Tiffany. I mean, I'm so excited to hear her Lilacs. I'm so excited.
I am too, and we talked about, and I'm going to be talking more in the next interview with Dr. Lily Katz about the work of George Walker. I'm excited to learn so much more about him. But so what else are you doing? What other engagements do you have coming up? Are they still there?
I mean, yes, luckily we're still going. I mean, I'm currently still a 3rd year at Washington National Opera, so I'm a K-Fritz Young Artist here. We're finishing up our AOI rehearsals. I get to go and I get to perform with Opera Philadelphia. I go to Lyric Opera of Chicago to do Fire, and then I come back to W&O to be a part of their Carmen production, be in the YA performances as Carmen.
And there we are. That's the trope again, but she's still a strong woman. That
very much so.
She makes her choices, and that's good, at least.
That part. Strong and wrong.
Yep, definitely. And as we said, you got to do Highway 1 USA. Yes. Which was only filmed, right? It was not done live.
No. So it was in fact a live performance. It was all outdoors. They decided to make a stage in one of their nearby parking lots, and it was actually quite a nice venue for it being outside, and it felt safe. It was very different to have mics on, because I mean, clearly outside your sound doesn't bounce back to you. But
yes.
Once again, we were very resourceful in 20 and 21.
Right, opera singers and mics. What's that?
Who?
And also the major advent of parking lot opera everywhere.
Yeah, now, I mean, I really wanted to see that one at Michigan opera where they did the Wagnerian thing in the parking garage. I really wanted to look into that, but I mean, clearly everybody was trapped inside. But like, once again, innovation really does come around when you don't have the resources. I mean, I can't tell you how many concerts I had in my apartment. Freddie Ballantyne actually used to live in my building. So he used to come to my apartment. He's like, can I borrow your living room? Can I borrow your balcony? Can I borrow a wig and a dress? And I'm like, you know what? Yes.
Yeah, I know. And it's Atlanta Opera has built a whole kind of circus tent.
Yeah. There was a lot of cool stuff going on.
And they went further because they kind of then started building from that feeling of, you know, opera-ness and circus tent, and then kind of melding the works to kind of work in that kind of an atmosphere. That's been fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
So you also you said you mentioned the Night Trip. Now that's there's some challenges in that story, but it's still everyone lives.
That's true. I mean, there's a lot of times where, especially when you're talking about Black stories, you do have a lot of racism rooted in the storyline. In that case, she's 16, she's finally going on the road with her uncles, but they have to travel at night because, you know, this is 1950s Chicago going towards the South, and, you know, things are very dangerous, and they have a racist encounter, and she has to kind of learn right then and there that everything isn't lollipops and sunshine. There's a lot of darkness out there, and even though there's darkness there, the light is still there.
Yes. Now that's interesting, traveling at night, because I thought that was actually the less safe time.
It's because there were less people around.
Mm-hmm. Indeed.
Yep.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense, although the racists were still out. Lord knows.
They don't go very far, do they?
No, they don't.
Mm-hmm.
Even in New York City, they pop
everywhere.
Up. Yeah.
And it's funny because so many people will be like, oh, so-and-so is not racist. This place is great. Wrong. It's everywhere. Sometimes it's not as obvious as other places. Sometimes it's very discreet, but sometimes it's there. And as a woman of color myself, you've learned to have to maneuver past it and overcome, and sometimes educate idiots that decide that they want to try you that day.
Indeed. Well, this has been lovely talking with you, and thank you.
It's been lovely talking to you too.
Hello, this is Chuck Sachs for Indie Opera Podcast, and I'll be chatting with soprano Tiffany Townsend, who will be the soloist for Gregory Walker's Pulitzer Prize winning Lilacs, which is the curtain opener for Opera Philadelphia's concert presentation of Stravinsky's Oedipus Rex, being presented January 21st and 23rd in Verizon Hall at the Kimmel Center. Good morning, Tiffany. You're in LA, morning. So it is actually morning for you.
Yes, it's about 10:06.
and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, thank you.
Were you out there for the holidays?
I was not. I was actually in Jackson, Mississippi, which is my hometown. So I spent there for the holidays. So I got back here a couple of days ago, which was also kind of nightmarish, but at least I got here.
Did you have any snow in Jackson?
No, it wasn't snow. It was just the airlines were kind of a little bit like discombobulated. So I spent about 8 hours in Dallas.
Wow.
Even though it was only like an hour away from Jackson. There's just like so much happening, and didn't end up getting to LA until late at night. But
yeah,
it was fine.
Yeah, it's the airlines were really messed up, and unfortunately so are the roads. It's like, yeah. I'm sure you've heard about like the people stuck.
Virginia, yes, that's crazy, for like stuck on the road for 12 hours in snow and couldn't go anywhere. I just
27 hours. There's a whole
27. Wow.
Yeah. We literally finally got snow very early this morning in New York, and it looked lovely until, you know, then the trucks and everything started going over it.
Now it's dirty.
So, you made your professional debut in 2019 as Princess Ninetta in The Love of Three Oranges by Stravinsky with Opera Philadelphia. How was that experience for you?
It's by Prokofiev, I believe. Actually, it's by Sergei Prokofiev, I believe. The Love for Three Oranges.
You're right. You are right.
It's hard because Oedipus and yes.
Yes, I know. It's early for me.
Yeah, no.
And I hadn't even written that in my question, and I stupidly added it.
Don't worry.
Yeah.
It's okay.
So it's Prokofiev. Go ahead.
It was amazing. I mean, it was my very first professional debut for opera company, so it was really cool. And also, Opera Philadelphia has always kind of been like I went to Curtis, and so that's where I kind of like really, really blossomed as an artist. And so Opera Philadelphia was kind of always down the street. We were always doing co-productions with them. The maestro was always conducting some of our shows. And so it was nice to kind of like go from education to a professional situation where it felt like I was coming home to family. But also that show, I remember first getting the score and thinking that I was going to be one of the princesses that died, that wasn't saved. And then to actually keep like looking and see like, oh no, I'm actually the one that gets the prince. I never get the prince. Like what's happening? So it was a really like wonderful little fairy. It kind of awakened my little Disney princess fairy tale kind of thing. And especially doing that show, I didn't realize how important it was for I think some of the audience members to see someone like me be a princess and have a happy ending. So I think that was even more so a bit of a joy for me to be able to facilitate that for them.
Absolutely, that was exciting for me to see too. It's I'm sure you're leafing through it just like actors do, and it's like, how many lines do I have? Where am I? It's like, oh, wait a minute.
Wait, no, I don't.
I'm a secondary lead. Oh my God.
No, exactly. And I was like, I come back.
Yes.
I also get taken away.
Yeah, the character gets turned into a rat.
Yes.
And then you come back and you're dressed as a large rat.
Dressed large rat, and then I emerge as this beautiful princess.
Yes. People, if you do not know The Love of Three Oranges, go look into it. It is truly an wonderfully insane farce.
Huge cast.
It really is. It's a huge cast. And there's so much going on, and it really is an amazing piece. And I'm so what do you like most about working for Opera Philadelphia?
Like I said, they've kind of been,
they
were always next door.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, my very first show with Curtis was conducted by the maestro of Philadelphia, Maestro Corrado Rovaris.
Oh God.
So my very first show, I was like, oh, it's the maestro from Opera Philadelphia, but it was just such an incredible experience. And they've always we've done co-productions at Curtis.
So we'll say your favorite thing is Corrado Rovaris.
One of my favorite things. There's many favorite things around about that opera company, but they've always just kind of been like the very supportive of my development, and they've always kind of been in the audience for my shows, and I've always seen them after the shows, and they've always been like, it's so great to see you develop. And so I think when I get to actually work with them, it's always been like, oh, it's so good to see you develop because we remembered you when you were like in school, and now we get to have you as a professional artist, and we're just really excited to see you grow. And so anytime I'm back, it just feels like a second home to me.
And also, I mean, the Zagbar, you got to do a new piece by Renee Orth, who was a composer in residence at Opera Philadelphia. And that was Mark Campbell was the librettist too, and conducted by Daniela Candelari, and you were a lead in that.
Yes.
The mother of a biracial family. That was and I'm now, of course, I'm blanking on the title.
Empty the House.
Empty the House. Yes.
It's okay. You had it in the beginning.
I did, didn't I?
You did.
I mean, that was fascinating to see, and a really lovely new work.
Yeah.
And was that one of the first new works you had ever done?
Yes, actually. I think it was, yeah, in terms of opera, one of the first new works that I had done, and the part had been rewritten for my voice, which was, I had never had that in my life. It was very
And
spectacular.
that's what can happen with new operas.
Oh my gosh, it was spectacular, but also that story just was so so heart-wrenching, and a lot I identified with, in terms of like the relationship you have with, you know, your mothers, and the things that you want to say and sometimes don't get to say, and how like life can end without, you know, you ever resolving those issues. And so it was very humanistic for me, and it meant a lot to be able to do that show.
Yeah, it was an emotional ghost story, which is really fascinating. So let's go on to, we're supposed to be talking about Lilacs, but hey, I read that the composer George Walker strived to create his own style of music. Now, what can the audience expect to hear stylistically in Lilacs?
I don't want to give too much away, but a lot of syncopated rhythms, especially coming from the vocal part. But honestly, a lot of beautiful, really, really sweeping melodic lines. There's a bit of like kind of, I guess, not like really fighting, but there's kind of like a bit of conflict between the vocal line and the orchestra in certain spots. And so I think that that'll be really, really exciting and interesting. But it's a gorgeous couple of songs. And so I think they're gonna really enjoy, especially those really big sweeping moments with the orchestra and the voice kind of just really blossoms. So I think that it's gonna be very exciting, and I'm very excited to do them.
Yeah, I mean, most of us don't know who George Walker was, although he did a lot of firsts. I mean, first was it at Oberlin, I think, and then first at Curtis, first African-American composer to win a Pulitzer.
For this composition.
And for the, yes, exactly. And that wasn't until 1996. Yeah.
I think 1996. Let me double check. I don't want to.
Oh.
It's in here somewhere.
Let's see.
I think it's like 1996 or 1998. You might be right.
No, 96. 96.
Yeah.
There we are. Yes.
Yes, 1996 is right in my face.
Now, is this your first experience performing the work of an African-American composer? And
no, this is not my first experience performing the work of an African-American composer, but this is my first experience performing George Walker. So that, and anytime I get to perform something by an African-American composer, I'm ecstatic, because also I didn't know too much about George Walker before. I think I attended something that this was before he passed, when I was at Curtis. He did, I think either the Curtis Orchestra or the Philadelphia Orchestra did a couple of pieces by him, and he was sitting in the audience, and that was like my first introduction. It was like, oh, this man went to Curtis, and what? Who is this? And so now to get this and be able to perform his music, unfortunately after his passing, but to be able to now actually perform it's kind of like a full circle moment, because I do remember that moment of them acknowledging him in that concert, and him standing up, and all of us around being like, wait, who is this? And
yes, I mean, his work is a little more known depending upon, you know, where you are in the orchestral world. But I mean, there's also, as we spoke a little earlier, Florence Price and Margaret Bonds are all beginning to break out, thanks to the big movements we're having in this country.
Yeah.
And it's important. I mean, you know, everyone kind of knows, you know, Scott Joplin, whatever, and and then, you know, The Entertainer, and who cares? I mean, you know, he wrote so much more. but there
So
were,
much more.
and Ninetta, but there are so many other African-American composers, especially women composers, who are out there
Absolutely.
writing opera and oratorios. And it is fascinating. And then, of course, thank you, God, the living ones who are finally breaking out further than they did.
Yes.
And I can't wait. I'm going to be talking with Rehanna Thelwell, and she's done actually
Yes.
many of the new works that are coming out. But now we've all been living through this crazy pandemic, and now we're back living in this pandemic, and it's like it just keeps surging. Did it have a real effect on how you prepared to sing this role? I mean, besides doing your own work, about the other people you needed to work with, was it all on Zoom, and what is that like?
So I think when I started doing this, we were kind of towards the midpoint of we can be in person, we just have to have a lot of protocols. So I was still able to kind of prepare it how I normally would prepare it. But I think I also did a lot of work how I like learned how to do work during the pandemic. Like during the pandemic, everything was, even I had some issues because, noise complaints and certain things. So I kind of had to figure out other ways of practicing and rehearsing and studying that didn't require me like full out singing. So I think I still utilized a lot of the techniques and stuff that I learned throughout the pandemic. And I kind of added that with like being able to, like, it was still limited, like coachings were limited. So I still was able to do some work, but not as much as I would have loved to now, especially since the surge has kind of happened again. We're kind of being recommended to stay home. I'm gonna have to use more so of those techniques to like, really make sure that it's solid, but it's okay. I've done it before. It'll be fine. Also during the pandemic, I had to learn an opera completely at home, and it was a filmed opera, and then I went and was able to do it. So I think that the pandemic taught me a lot about what I'm capable of, even under.
Which opera was that?
This is an opera called Penny by Douglas Pugh, and it was with Opera Grand Rapids, and it was a modern work, mainly focused on a young lady who was finding her voice, and she just happened to be living with autism. And so it was a really beautiful work, but I had to learn it like at home with my little keyboard and MIDI and like my little click. The way I learned so much technology during the pandemic, it's not funny. But like I just learned how to put things together, and it just gave me new skills, and so I get to, I think, add that with how I normally learn music. So it was a challenge, but out of like challenges forces you to learn new things. So I think I was very happy to learn that I could do that. So it was difficult, but not impossible.
No. So I've just got one last question for you. So what do you have coming up after this, the Lilacs?
The contracts have not been finalized, so unfortunately I can't say that, but I do have a pretty exciting orchestra situation coming up this summer. So I guess just be on the lookout for that. But the contract's not been finalized, so I can't say it.
Okay, that totally understand. But meanwhile, people can see you on the January 21st to 23rd in Philadelphia.
Yes.
And that is exciting enough already. So thank you for talking with me. And this has been Chuck Sachs and Tiffany Townsend for Indie Opera Podcast. And if you like what you hear, please go support us on Patreon or go to our website, indieopera.com, and click the donate button. And thank you, Tiffany, and everyone have a great day.
Thank you so much for today as well.